Welcome to It Is My Life show with Felicity. Today my guest is Lindsay Dearlove of Hester Charity in the UK. Welcome, Lindsay, to the show.
Thank you.
Today, Lindsay, I would like to know how you safeguard women. Well, the topic of discussion today is how you safeguard women who have been through domestic violence. So first of all, how do these women come to you, Lindsay?
Well, it depends. I mean, as Hester is a charity, we do have a number of different types of services that work with both women and children who've experienced domestic abuse. We also work with victims of human trafficking as well. So if you're a victim of domestic abuse in the UK at the present time, there are a number of different ways that you can access support. The first one is often contacting the police. For many victims of domestic abuse, that's not necessarily an option they would choose to take. The other option, and something that we are very proud to say that we provide within Hester, is that we have independent domestic violence advocates, also known quite commonly as IDFAs. The IDFA services are based within the community. So for example, they'll be based within a social services department, police station, or in a community centre.
So, but how does a victim actually get to know about these IDFAs? How do they come to Hester Charity?
Well, in many ways, when you're contacting an IDFA service, you've been referred from another service, so we can't underestimate the power and the importance that those services provide to victims of domestic abuse as being a front door way to access other services. The IDFA service is unique in the sense where you can contact it regardless of where you are or where you're living, and you can access immediate crisis intervention support. The other area that you can access support through is by contacting the Refuge helpline, which is run in partnership with Women's Aid and Refuge. And that telephone line is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it provides access to victims for refuge accommodation. So the idea would be that you would contact that telephone number. They would then give you a list of refuges in the area in which you choose to flee to, and then you would be...
Hold on. Once you call Refuge or Domestic Violence Helpline, you are given a list of refuges to go to. So you, the victim, have to call refuges. Like, you get on the list, call 1, 2, 3 to know if there's space for you to go to.
Absolutely.
But why is that?
Well, from our perspective at Hester, we know that actually the support that we provide as a refuge starts from the very, very first contact that we have with the victim.
Yeah, but if... Okay, let's say I'm a victim of abuse right now, and I'm traumatized. I've just probably left the house, and I'm probably at the police station, and I've called you, I've called National Domestic Violence Helpline, and you're giving me a list. I don't think I'm in an emotional state to want to be calling lists of refuges to know where to go to.
I agree completely with you. And you'd be hard-pressed to find any refuge worker, manager or service delivery charity that doesn't agree with what you're saying. But the reality is that our support starts from the point that we have contact. We know a woman is at the highest risk of physical harm while she's trying to leave the perpetrator. Mm-hmm. So having that one-to-one contact and being able to understand the environment that that victim is fleeing from helps us to create a safety plan with her to enable her to access a refuge. So that safety plan could be, how are we going to get you and your children out of the accommodation in a safe way before he returns from work? How are we physically going to move you from one part of the country to the other part of the country in the safest, most supportive manner?
Okay, so now I've called you and you've answered.
Yes.
And you've offered me a place in your refuge. Say this woman is at the police station or at a neighbor's house or out on the street, whatever, and she's called you, there's a place now available. What's your next step? What do you do next to make sure she has a place to be comfortable and safe?
So I have just previously mentioned the importance of us creating the safest way for you to leave that situation. So when you're arriving, our role now is to help settle you and your children into the refuge, allow you to meet the other woman in the refuge and have a level of support that comes from peer support. But most importantly, it's about addressing some of the immediate physical needs. For example, it's ensuring that you have access to medical treatments, that you can go to the GP if you want to, that if you have any needs around mental health, that we can try and put support in place in the early days. The next thing that often comes from the message that we hear from our victims is that they've moved to a new area and it's completely scary. And if you're moving from outside of London into London, London's a big place with a lot of new things and new systems you have to learn. For example, using public transport, how to safely get yourself from one place to the other when there are hundreds of thousands of people. So really, our role as refuge caseworkers when somebody first arrives is to actually encourage them to feel as safe and settled as possible. There are a number of different ways that we do that. One of the areas that we constantly focus on as an organisation is person-centred, needs-led support.
What's that?
So basically, every individual who's experienced domestic abuse every woman who's experienced domestic abuse has different circumstances and therefore have different needs. So it's our role as the refuge caseworker to actually understand that and ensure that we're putting support in place with the victim in order to empower them and not to continue to override their decisions. It's really important.
How do you mean empower them?
Well, there is such a power that comes from, firstly, from making small choices. Choices about what you would like to eat, what you would like to wear, or big choices as to which school you want your children to attend. Every opportunity we give to a victim of domestic abuse to create safe, informed decisions is slowly empowering them. Because one of the areas where the abuser has taken their power is by not allowing them to make decisions over themselves, their children, and in many cases, their actual body. So it's important.
So, these women, how about when a woman comes, definitely she's fleeing domestic violence, and I know from my own experience and from other people that I've helped and my students as well that yes, you fleeing from the home does not really mean that you're kind of safe.
Absolutely.
So when you have a case, do you move them far away from probably where they live to a different like city or town, or how do you make sure the abuser does not find them?
Well, to be honest with you, Felicity, in the modern day technology, that's a massive thing that we have to overcome. We have numerous things that are embedded in our lifestyles every single day, from location finder on your phone to notifying people where you're on Facebook that give away people's identities. So for us, the most important thing is listening to where the victim feels that she's safe. So for her, being safe could mean that I'm moving to an area where it is close to my family, and he knows where my family lives, but actually the value of that support that I receive from that family network is greater than that risk of him being at their accommodation.
And also the victim has a role to play in keeping themselves safe, because a lot of women have kind of been able to find a way to contact the abuser even though they weren't supposed to contact them, and therefore exposing themselves to further maybe abuse or for the abuser to get to know where they are. So have you had cases where you've had a woman, you've put her in a safe place and she somehow contacted her abuser?
Absolutely.
And how did you fix that?
Well, in the case, what you first have to understand is the power of coercive control and the power of that abuser, the power that the abuser holds over that victim, and the messages that he or she has potentially been given to that victim of domestic abuse. Leaving me, for example, your children will be taken into care. If you leave me, your immigration status will be destroyed. If you attempt to speak to somebody about what's happening, I will prove to everybody that you have a mental health condition. So those fears are entrenched in a woman's experience. So it's completely understandable from a refuge service provider's point of view that somebody may choose to go back to live with their perpetrator. But what we know from experience and understanding is that choice is potentially informed by coercive control. So if we can work with her around her empowerment and her understanding of what domestic abuse is, but more so giving names to the abuse that she's experienced. Because I find it's often a concept that we use quite flippantly as providers of domestic abuse services, and often I hear it from some of our statutory services that woman doesn't understand what domestic abuse is. And for me, that cuts my soul, because a woman living in an abusive situation is the best person to
She
understand.
knows what it's about.
Exactly.
She definitely knows.
Exactly.
So when you have a woman, say, with or without children, your refuge, how long do they stay there for?
Well, the difficulty is now that we have a number of different changes to the environment around a refuge. For example, we know that the likelihood of a woman being able to move into a local authority housing provision is quite limited due to the fact that there's very little housing stock. Many of our victims of domestic abuse who are living in our refuges can be with us between 6 months up to, in some very, very difficult situations, which often is compounded by the fact of housing, up to 2 years. So I would say that what we would aim to do as an organisation, and for the benefit of the victim in the refuge, is to try and move that person to the next stage, which would be independent living, within about 6 to 8 months. But it's all dependent on what that victim feels ready to do.
So basically you have to work with them regardless of what services you provide. If the victim is not ready to accept your services, the help you offer them kind of limited, isn't it?
Well, it depends really, because often that can be a comment that's made quite flippantly by, again, lots of people working with vulnerable adults, that she doesn't want to access help. And my argument to that is that every woman, man, a child experiencing domestic abuse does want help, but they want the help that they determine. And we need to listen better to that.
So Lindsay, tell me more about the UK Says No More campaign. What is it about?
The UK Says No More campaign is built on a campaign that started in the US in 2011, and the underlying aim is to create a universal symbol for the prevention and awareness around domestic violence and sexual assault. And what's been created is the pin. The idea is that only together we can end domestic violence and sexual assault, and that togetherness spans from the individual person walking on the street all the way up to the corporate entity who provide numerous employment opportunities to people across the world. So what we're asking is, let's get involved, take a stand.
You see, that's so crucial, because I've been saying this for so long that everybody has to get involved. And domestic violence affects each and every one of us directly or indirectly, whether we like it or not. And people think that because you're not a victim, or you don't know a victim, you're not a friend of a victim, has nothing to do with you. Oh no, you're affected, because like you mentioned, if you're an employer and one of your staff has been abused and she doesn't show up for work, or he doesn't show up for work, somebody else has to do the work. So somebody else is suffering, your business might suffer as well. Productivity is reduced, there's an impact on your business profit. You understand, it just like it goes on and on and on. And if you're a neighbor, you think you don't have issues, but your neighbor's been beaten, she's screaming at night, how are you going to sleep? You understand? So we are all affected, and we all have to take a stand. So I totally support this campaign, and I'm quite happy it's now in the UK. So what can people do to participate in this campaign?
Well, there's two parts about it. We're asking the general public to endorse, promote, and take a stand about domestic and sexual violence. So promote, there is a very important message that we need to get out, and that is that there are no more excuses for domestic or sexual violence, and actually that only together we can end domestic violence and sexual assault. So we've released 2 videos which have been kindly created by some of our celebrity friends. One is called Attention and the other one is called Excuses. They're both available on YouTube. It's worth having a look at them and sharing them. We're asking you to share these videos. The promoting is, again, talk about us, talk about domestic violence and sexual assault positively on the internet. Use your social media accounts to highlight the fact that it is everybody's issue, that there are no more excuses. And it's especially important after the past couple of weeks and the media attention which has been given to some high-profile domestic abuse cases, but also quite recently the Stanford rape case, and actually how powerful that victim impact statement was. It really boils down to that if 1 in 4 women experience domestic abuse in their lifetime, and of those women are experiencing repeated incidences of domestic abuse, and 1 in 6 men will experience domestic abuse, we all have a friend, a brother, a mother, a sister, a neighbor who could benefit from having your support.
Just to reiterate, the UK says no more campaigns. It's not just about domestic violence against women, is it?
It's about domestic abuse in its entirety, because what we do know is that domestic abuse does impact the moms, children, the family members of a victim.
No, I mean victims of domestic violence.
Yeah.
There's the men as well as young people or children.
Yes.
So the campaign is about domestic abuse no more.
Absolutely.
Either you're a woman, you're a man, you're a child victim. We don't want abuse, period.
Absolutely, you're spot on with that. And what we recognize is that actually only together we can do that. And it has to start with not laughing at inappropriate jokes, challenging negative statements that are made about a man or a woman, and actually it's about listening. What we do know is that a victim who is experiencing domestic abuse will potentially tell 13 other agencies before they find the support that they need.
Excuse me?
13 agencies before they find the support that they need.
Right.
So out of those 13 ears that they talk to, if one of those ears stops and listens and hears what the victim is experiencing. And it's not about, and this is what often I hear from families and friends, and actually what comes out of a lot of the feedback that we receive after domestic homicide reviews is that a lot of people say, I knew something was wrong, but I just didn't know how to talk to them about it. And I suppose what I would say today is, the one thing that you can do is listen without judgment.
On that note, Lindsay, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming to the show and good luck with the campaign. And whatever we can do, we're going to keep doing to make sure domestic violence is eradicated. Thank you very much. And now on to Felicity Recommends. Today I'm going to recommend, if you're going through abuse, we'd like to hear from you, definitely. To get help in the US, you can download the Are You Safe app, and in the UK, the Bright Sky app. And also you can visit our website, itismylifeshow.com, to get all the information and phone numbers you need. If you're not in one of these countries mentioned, I'm sure you'll be able to find help somehow. If not, do contact us as well at info@itismylifeshow.com. And also I'd like to recommend my book here called It Is My Life and I'm in Charge, which is about my own personal experience of domestic violence. Yes, I've been through this, and that's why I'm passionate about this show. So until next time, stay safe and live with love.